Several weeks later, the climate at Kent was noticeably cooler.
Peace returned to the Kent State campus this morning after over 2 weeks of unrest. For a change, there were no rallies, meetings, protests, or voting in progress to disrupt normal academic routine. The climax to recent campus conflict came last night with the results of a referendum sponsored by the concerned citizens of the KSU community. Voting by both students and faculty supported administrative stands against SDS, immediate student suspensions, and hearings procedures against violent protesters. The proposal for a 4-day boycott of classes also was soundly defeated by the nearly 9,000 ballots cast yesterday. Early this morning, President Robin I. White urged the campus to take a cooling-off period for the remainder of the spring quarter. The normal business of the university should proceed for all students, staff, and faculty, said Dr. White. He also requested that all pending questions be directed towards his newly appointed Student Faculty Study Commission and said steps are being taken through Dr. Robert E. Manson, the Vice President for Student Affairs, to update the Student Conduct Code in line with mandatory state laws. This is Jim Carfield reporting from Kent State University.
From the time of the April disturbances until almost exactly 1 year later, KSU seemed to be, once again, just another university. Then, on the evening of April 30th, 1970, television viewers across the nation saw regular programming preempted by a special statement from the President of the United States, Richard Nixon.
Tonight, American and South Vietnamese units will attack the headquarters for the entire communist military operation in South Vietnam. This key control center has been occupied by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong for 5 years in blatant violation of Cambodia's neutrality.
To many students, the widening of U.S. military forces into Cambodia both scared and angered them. It meant living under the fear of a continued draft in a country which had refused to acknowledge past voices of protest. It meant the continuation of an undeclared war they had grown up with almost all their lives. It meant more nightly news clips of dying soldiers and homeless mothers and children. The following day, on May 1st, a noon rally was held on the Commons. The ringing of the victory bell brought an assembly of 300 to 400 students together, led by Steve Sheroff, Chris Plant, and Robert Franklin. Left-wing rhetoric filled the air as a copy of the Constitution was buried in the ground. Shortly after, the rally dispersed with no disturbances. That same afternoon, the Black United students held a rally which also ended peaceably. Feeling university conditions were stable, President White caught a 5:30 p.m. flight out to Mason City, Iowa, where other business awaited him. He would not return to Kent until Sunday, May 3rd. Friday night was a warm night. The bars on North Water Street were serving liquor, but just as intoxicating were the spirits of politics and spring. At 10:42 p.m., a beer bottle was thrown at a passing police car.
A patrol car passing by halted to a stop. Said Officer McDougal in dismay, the force can't do a decent job, 'cause the kids got no respect for the law today. And blah, blah.
2 successive patrol cars were also pelted with objects. Bargoers began to congregate on the sidewalk and street. Members of a motorcycle gang, the Chosen Few, performed various stunts to the applause and approval of the crowd. A bonfire was lit in the middle of North Water Street at 11:30 p.m. 20 minutes later, part of the crowd began moving towards the center of town, smashing windows along the way. An internal communique entitled For Your Information later reported that
50 plate glass windows were shattered as the group turned up Main Street toward campus. The group diminished in numbers until it reached the edge of campus at Main and Lincoln Streets, where police unleashed a barrage of tear gas, scattering the mob.
So many more people were involved Friday night and became involved when they closed the bars and sent everyone into the streets, so that you had, instead of maybe 200 people being gassed, you had a couple thousand being gassed. Okay, so all these people got involved. Guys out with their dates, they were gassed. Guys who were in the bars watching the Lakers-Knicks game on television, these people were suddenly, zap lights come on, okay, leave, we're closing the bar. In the fourth quarter of the Lakers-Knicks game, a lot of people will get upset at this. And they get outside, suddenly they're confronted by policemen with clubs, helmets, gas, not even knowing what's going on. This is a very traumatic thing. I mean, to suddenly walk out of a place where you've been comfortably seated, and to be tear gassed, to be confronted with nightsticks, with hundreds of policemen, and be pushed back to a place possibly where you don't even live. Like, everyone was pushed back to the campus. Well, a lot of students didn't live on the campus when we're being pushed in the opposite direction from which they lived.
A curfew was declared by Mayor Satrom, and 14 people were arrested. By 3 a.m. Saturday morning, all was, once again, quiet in Kent. The National Guard had been placed on alert.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear.
Early Saturday morning, a reporter surveyed the downtown damage.
The 4 big main picture windows at the First Federal Building here have been broken, and the glass you hear now is the sound of it being knocked out for repair. One big hole at Ohio Edison that's patched up with cardboard and masking tape will have to be replaced, however. Service trucks downtown on North Water now, helping with cleanup procedures. There's various 55-gallon barrels here just filled with glass. Hardest building hit by count was the Portage National Bank, including the credit department. All of the windows on the east side of North Water Street, just about the great majority of them, were damaged.
Acting in the city's best interests, Mayor Satrom declared,
"An emergency exists, and a curfew will be in effect at 8 p.m. on Saturday, May 2nd, 1970. We ask for the cooperation of all Kent citizens during this period."
By noon Saturday, Kent Police Chief Roy Thompson was receiving distressed phone calls from town merchants. It seems that anonymous telephoners were threatening the store owners to either place anti-war signs in their windows or run the risk of having their establishments burned. Throughout the day, Chief Thompson continued to remind the mayor of reports which allegedly identified weathermen on campus. The day was ugly, with rumors of LSD in the water supply and plans to burn down the town. Meanwhile, word was spreading of an evening rally to be held on the Commons. At 5 p.m., Mayor Satrom contacted Governor Rhodes and requested the aid of the Ohio National Guard. University officials were not advised of this action. 3 hours later, the rally on the Commons was in progress with about 700 people in attendance. At 8:30 p.m., someone threw flares into the ROTC building and set it ablaze.
This minute, the building is erupting in huge flames and crackling. You can hear the ammunition.
Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest if you're not involved, you leave the area. You are subject to arrest.
The building just fell in on one end, and the students on the hillside are now applauding.
When fire trucks arrived nearly 20 minutes later, firemen were thwarted and harassed.
We did receive this call at approximately 8 o'clock last night about this ROTC building being on fire. We proceeded to the campus area for this fire. Immediately after starting to lay in on this fire, we were surrounded, harassed, interfered with by the rioters. They did damage our hose, they cut it, and we had to pull out. We were getting stoned, both with cans, bricks, you name it. We did pull out, and within a very short period after that, after being assured of protection, we did move back in on the scene.
The internal communique, for your information, reported it this way.
At the request of Mayor Satrom, the National Guard, which had earlier been placed on alert by Governor James Rhodes, was called. The Ohio Highway Patrol was also called for assistance.
Right between these two carriers. Stay here.
The crowd on the Commons began to retreat from the gas attack as it moved toward Taylor Hall. Small grass fires were set, and a blaze was ignited in a trash barrel. Demonstrators, upon reaching a physical education supply shed next to the tennis courts, began to break its windows. It was set afire and burned to the ground.
There's tear gas going off in the background. The students have dispersed from the tennis courts.
At 9:40 p.m., the National Guard appeared on Main Street. The crowd decided to take another look at the ROTC building to see if it was still on fire. As it moved toward the blazing ROTC building, University police moved forward, firing tear gas. National Guard members scattered the remnants of the demonstrators beyond the Commons.
Generals Canterbury and Del Corso of the National Guard are now on the campus directing the entire action.
By 9:45 p.m., the ROTC building had nearly been leveled.
Crews are now just hosing down what is left of the building. It's about a stack of 5 feet of rubble, a few flames on each end right now.
The Guard maintained security all night.
The campus of Kent State University is relatively quiet now as students have settled in their dorms and homes for the night. Approximately 600 National Guardsmen from Akron and the Cleveland areas are deployed either on campus or in the community nearby. The units are under the direction of Major General Sylvester Del Corso, commander of the Ohio National Guard. Lieutenant Colonel John Spain, in explaining the presence of the Guard in Kent, said, quote, "We are here to assist the civil authorities and the city and the campus security office in restoring order. The Guard was called in response to student disturbances that resulted in the burning of a $50,000 ROTC building last night."
The ROTC building was not just any other building. It was the ROTC building, which represented a symbol which was judged negative.
Mid-morning on Sunday, Governor Rhodes arrived in Kent. A press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the firehouse.
We've seen here at the city of Kent, especially, probably the most vicious form of campus-oriented violence yet perpetrated by dissident groups and their allies in the state of Ohio. For this reason, most of the dissident groups have operated within the campus. This has moved over where they have threatened and intimidated merchants and people of this community. Now it ceases to be a problem of the colleges in Ohio. This now is the problem of the state of Ohio. And I want to assure you that we're going to employ every force of law that we have under our authority, not only to get to the bottom of the situation here at Kent, on the campus, in the city, and we have asked the complete cooperation of the district attorney of the federal government because federal supplies were burned and destroyed in the ROTC building, and these people, after we can find them, after a complete investigation, will be turned over to the federal government. We've asked the county prosecutor for a complete and comprehensive investigation. And there's some people now out on probation that there has been a strong word to the fact that they have participated in this. Now, we're going to put a stop to this for this reason. The same group that we're dealing with here today, and there's 3 or 4 of them, they only have one thing in mind, that is to destroy higher education in Ohio. And if they continue this and continue what they're doing, they're going to reach their goal for the simple reason that you cannot continue to set fires to buildings that are worth $5 and $10 million because you cannot get replacement from the Ohio General Assembly. And last night, I think that we have seen all forms of violence, the worst. And when they start taking over communities, this is when we're going to use every part of the law enforcement agency of Ohio to drive them out of Kent. We're going to make 2 recommendations to the Ohio General Assembly. Now, we've had this at Miami, in Oxford, Ohio, also at Ohio State University, and we had 32 police officers injured, and a couple very severe. We have these same groups going from one campus to the other, and to use a university, state-supported by the taxpayer of Ohio, as a sanctuary. And in this, they make definite plans of burning, destroying, and throwing rocks at police and at the National Guard and the Highway Patrol. We're asking the legislature that any person throwing a rock, brick, or stone at a law enforcement agency of Ohio, a sheriff, policeman, Highway Patrol, National Guard, becomes a felony. And secondly, we're going to ask for legislation that any person in the administrative side or as a student, if these people are convicted, whether it's a misdemeanor or felony, participating in a riot, they're automatically dismissed. There's no hearing, no recourse, and they cannot enter another state university in the state of Ohio. We are going to eradicate the problem. We're not going to treat the symptoms. And as long as this continues, higher education in Ohio is in jeopardy. And if they continue to give permissive consent, they will destroy higher education in this state.
At 1:25 p.m., NewsWrap, a university news service via telephone, reported that
Ohio Governor James A. Rhodes has declared a state of emergency to exist on the Kent State University campus and has ordered members of the National Guard to halt all rallies or demonstrations, peaceful or otherwise. Guard officers have ordered a 1 a.m. Monday curfew on campus for all students and unauthorized personnel. Any unauthorized persons moving about the campus after 1 a.m. Monday will be subject to arrest. The city ordinance restricting pedestrian movement after 8 p.m. throughout the city remains in effect.
the afternoon of May 3rd was, all in all, considerably quiet. Many have termed it to have been a carnival atmosphere. After 2 nights of tension and violence, the campus appeared to be a quiet forest of question marks. Students eyed guardsmen and guardsmen watched students. Late Sunday afternoon, President White, who had returned several hours earlier, issued a statement.
The university's position on several matters should be made quite clear at this time. First, Kent State University has been disastrously hurt. The hopes of all on campus have been placed in jeopardy, and whether or not any part of that loss can be retrieved depends upon immediate responsible actions from all quarters of the university community. We must show to the nation that Kent State University has much more to it than the ugliness it has seen in our midst. Second, we ought to be and are grateful for the effort and response from so many members of student and faculty leadership and the various security operations. These efforts helped temper the situation. Third, by order of the governor, the National Guard will remain in the Kent community and campus until its leadership decides their departure is safe. Events have taken those decisions out of university hands. Widespread damage and threats in the community have created an alarming situation. Fourth and finally, the university plans to maintain normal operations and classes will meet as scheduled.
Between 7 and 8 p.m. that evening, students began to congregate on the Commons. This was in violation of a state of emergency order which barred outdoor rallies and demonstrations.
Students are now marching around the hub and onto the Commons. The time is 8:20.
The group headed towards President White's house.
Now 25 minutes before 9, the group has started to move toward the northeast part of the campus. They circled the Eastway complex, are now heading toward the Tri-Towers. Time is now 10 minutes before 9 o'clock. Hey, look. 2 fires have now broken out in front of the Music and Speech building near the parking lot area. All right.
Attention. All Kent State students go inside the dorm. Do not remain on the outside.
As they approached the structure, students were met by tear gas.
We got gassed again. Oh, my goodness, that stuff's horrible. We were standing in the wind. And this thing came directly across on us. Oh, my eyes.
National Guardsmen forced back the crowd of approximately 3,000, and in the retreat, a splinter group of 200 turned and moved toward Main Street.
One group was heading downtown on Main Street. They are now reported a group is holed up in the library. They broke in. They are in the library. An ambulance has been dispatched to that place. The building has been surrounded. They called for a bullhorn down there to talk to these students. Others continue in the Main Street area.
At the intersection of Lincoln and Main, a confrontation developed. For your information, later reported that
Demonstrators made an effort to bargain with the guardsmen. They apparently thought that if they would move out of the street onto university property, both President White and Mayor Satram would come and speak with them.
Above the street scene, helicopters surveyed the area for so-called snipers.
Right above me is the helicopter with a massive searchlight. The time is now 10 o'clock.
About an hour later, 11 p.m., the Guard initiated disbursement using tear gas, billy clubs, and bayonets. In the melee, demonstrators pelted Guardsmen with rocks. There were injuries on both sides. At this point, many students felt they had been betrayed. As one student said the next day,
"Did you know about the betrayal last night on front campus? They told us we were going to be granted amnesty if we came back on the campus. We came back on the campus, the guards came on us, started throwing gas, and chased us from one end of the campus down there, Tri-Towers. And they lied to us. They said President White and the mayor of Kent were going to speak to us.
President White didn't know anything about it. They're trying to get rid of him now.
They said they were going to speak to us, and so we came back on campus, and what do? They start we know a lot of kids that were bayoneted, too, in the back and side, the stomach.
In all, 68 arrests were reported. Within 40 minutes, General Canterbury considered the campus secure and quiet.
Orders to break any outdoor assembly, whether peaceful or not, have been given as a result of Governor Rhodes' declaration of a state of emergency. Tear gas was used tonight to disperse a crowd of approximately 500 assembling in violation of these orders. The curfew that has just been imposed means that all students must immediately return to their dorms and remain there until tomorrow morning. All unauthorized persons moving on the campus will be subject to arrest by the National Guard. A curfew is also in effect in the city of Kent until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning.